Today, we're diving into the incredible story of Nepal's political journey. And really, it's a story about everything. Huge hope, crushing failure, and ultimately, a pretty radical new idea for how democracy is supposed to work.
So picture this, it's 2025 and Nepal is in absolute crisis. I mean, the parliament building is literally on fire. That image, wow, it's just this shocking symbol of a dream that was completely shattered. And the thing is, this didn't come out of nowhere. It was the result of nearly 20 years of promises that were just broken.
So, how did we get here? How did things get so bad? Well, the final trigger, believe it or not, was the government banning social media. And that's what sparked this massive youth-led protest that literally toppled the government. But you have to ask, right? How on earth does a social media ban become the thing that breaks the camel's back? To really get that, we've got to rewind. We have to go back to the very beginning.
So let's go back. Our story doesn't actually start with a crisis. It starts with this moment of incredible, almost electric hope. We're talking about the year 2008. A time when it felt like the entire country of Nepal was about to be reborn.
Okay, so you have this brutal, decade-long civil war. It finally ends, and there's this huge people's movement. And what happens next is just massive. One of the world's last Hindu monarchies is gone. A 240-year-old dynasty, just over. I mean, you can't overstate what a monumental shift this was. And out of all that, this incredible promise of a new Nepal begins to take shape.
And look, this wasn't some vague promise. It was super specific. It was about finally including marginalized communities in a real structural way. It was about ending centuries of feudalism. And, a big one, it was about creating economic prosperity so that the country's youth would finally stop leaving in droves. But the absolute core idea? It was this radical flip of the power dynamic. The citizens, the people, would now be the ultimate masters. And the politicians they elected, they were now supposed to be the dedicated servants. A total reversal. But, well, you know where this is going. That incredible promise started to fall apart. So the big question is, what went wrong? That's what we're digging into next, the diagnosis of failure. This long 17-year slide from hope right back into chaos.
Okay, so a huge part of the problem seems to start with the country's operating manual, the Constitution itself. Get this, Nepal's 2015 Constitution is 240 pages long. 240. It's just this incredibly dense, complex document. And you have to ask the question, right? How is the average person supposed to understand this? Heck, how are a lot of the elected officials supposed to fully get it?
But it gets even deeper. It's about the Constitution's DNA, you know? The source material we're looking at points out that it was heavily based on the Indian Constitution. And that document was, in turn, built on a foundation from the British colonial era. And here's the kicker. Those original frameworks were designed by an empire to rule people, not to serve them. So you've got this fundamental baked-in conflict. The goal is democracy, but the blueprints are from a system of control.
And that kind of structural flaw, well, it created the absolute perfect storm for a classic political problem, something called elite capture. It's a fancy term, but the idea is simple. It's when the institutions of the government, the very things meant to serve everyone, get hijacked by a small, powerful group. And instead of serving the public, they start serving themselves. Basically, the servants completely took over from the masters.
And the consequences of this weren't abstract, they were devastatingly real for everyday people. Politics just became this endless game of musical chairs, all about getting power, not about actually governing. Corruption went through the roof, and if you were powerful, you could get away with anything. The economy just stalled out, which forced millions, literally millions, of young people to leave Nepal just to find work. It created what the source material calls a hollowed-out nation.
And this is where social media becomes so important. Imagine you're a young Nepali, you're struggling to get by, maybe you're thinking about leaving the country. And then you go online and you see the kids of the political elite, the Nepo kids, flaunting these insane lifestyles, all funded by, well, you know. So when the government suddenly decides to ban those exact platforms, it wasn't seen as just censorship. It was seen as a blatant, desperate move to hide their own hypocrisy. And that was the spark that lit the whole thing on fire.
Okay, so if that's the diagnosis, this deep, fundamental disconnect between the people and the government, then what's the cure? This is where we get to the proposed solution, a really interesting concept called the sovereign's loop.
The whole idea here is to move way beyond just voting once every few years. The sovereign's loop is basically a system of tools, written right into the Constitution, that gives the citizens, the masters, direct and continuous power over their elected officials, the servants. It's about making the people's power something that's always on, always active.
So how does it work? Well, it comes down to three really concrete tools. First, you've got the citizen's veto. If Parliament passes a law that people hate, they can reject it. Simple. Second, the citizen's agenda. If the government isn't doing anything about a major issue, the people can draft and vote on their own laws. And third, and this is a big one, the citizen's firing power. You can actually recall and remove a corrupt or incompetent official before their term is even over.
And you see the game changer here, right? All these tools together would fundamentally change what it means to be an elected official. Winning an election is no longer a 5-year blank check to do whatever you want. Instead, it becomes more like a probationary period. You're always on notice because the masters, the people, can step in at any time.
And this is where we zoom out, because this whole story, this idea, it's about so much more than just Nepal. It has huge lessons for democracies all over the world. At the end of the day, it's about one simple question. Who really gets the final say?
So let's just break it down. The core problem, not just in Nepal, but in a lot of places, is that the idea of power to the people is just theoretical. It's on paper. The solution is to make that power a real, active, enforceable thing, right? So when the servants start ignoring the masters, you have to give the masters the tools to step in and fix it. You transform democracy from something you do for one day at the ballot box into a constant, ongoing process.
And I think this is the most powerful point from the source material. This whole diagnosis isn't about giving up on democracy. It's the exact opposite. It's a defense of it. The argument, when you boil it all down, is that democracy didn't fail Nepal. Nepal's leaders failed democracy.
So that leaves us with a really big, provocative question. And it's a question for every single one of us, no matter where we live. Is it really enough for a constitution to have all of these beautiful words about the people having the power? Or does that document also need to have the actual, unbreakable tools for the people, the masters, to enforce that power when things go wrong?